Hello, everybody. Welcome to today's show. If you are joining for the first time, this is part of our WBS LinkedIn Live Digital Transformation Series. For that, we meet every Thursday at 4:30 p.m. Eastern. We bring one topic each week related to digital transformation, and we bring a panel of experts that specialize in that specific topic. For today, we are going to be discussing a decision that you need to make as an executive when you are undertaking any digital transformation initiative or the ERP initiative. And that is going to be cloud versus on-prem. Typically, in any digital engagement, you are going to have these two options that you need to explore based on several different criteria. So we will be discussing the pros and cons of these two options. So we have a panel. We are going to be starting with the introduction. Chris, do you want to start with your introduction, if you don't mind?
Sure. Chris Gherardini, CEO of Turnkey Technologies. We are a 27-year-old firm that focuses on ERP and CRM implementations. So we love doing it. More to come.
Thank you so much, Chris. And your experience is going to be super relevant today just because you have seen so many implementations and you have seen where cloud and on-prem both are going to be relevant. Now, I am going to move to Tom. Tom, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. Thanks, Sam. And hi, everybody. Tom Rodden, CIO at Varian Medical Systems. I have about 10 years of consulting experience doing large project implementations, some cloud, some on-prem, with Deloitte and Pricewaterhouse. And the last 13 years, I've been a member of the team at Varian Medical Systems, the last 4, the CIO here.
Okay, amazing. Thank you so much, Tom, for being here. And obviously, you have seen a lot of large implementations, and you have been part of some of the regulated organizations where the on-prem option could be extremely relevant. So your expertise is going to be significantly relevant for this panel. Wayne, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. Thank you, Sam. Glad to be here. My name is Wayne Sadin. I've got about 25 years as a CIO. Back when on-prem was the only option, I started out. And for the last 10 years, I've been consulting to boards and C-suites on digital transformation and digital optimization, trying to fix the messes that people get themselves into.
Yeah, and Wayne, I am super excited to have you here because you are probably going to have the longest tenure as far as the on-prem experience goes. So you are going to bring a lot of stories overall. And if that option is still going to be relevant today, especially more from the TCO perspective. So thank you so much for being here. Jenny, would you like to introduce yourself if you don't mind?
Yes, I am. Thanks. This is Danny Winton. I'm a sales director at WWT with a long history in solutioning through the OEM. So we've been building both on-prem and cloud solutions for many years.
Okay, amazing. Thank you so much, Danny, for being here. And your experience is going to be super relevant just because you have a lot more infrastructure expertise that the other panelists may not have. So thank you so much for being here. Andy, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. My name is Andy Pratico. I work with a company called Essential Software Solutions. We specialize in ERP software for small to mid manufacturers, mostly across Canada. I've been in the ERP business for manufacturers for 40 years. So like Wayne, I definitely remember on-prem being the only option. But we represent the ERP suite from Infor, and Essential Software has been in business for 47 years.
Okay, amazing. And Andy, I think your experience is going to be significantly relevant as well, just because you have probably seen similar number of implementations as Chris. I'm not going to judge you guys on your age, but definitely you seem equally sort of in terms of the duration that you may have seen those many implementations. So thank you so much for being here, Andy. Now let's dig deeper into the topic. And for today, obviously you guys are supercharged and just want to jump onto the topic because this is always going to be a hot debate, especially in the technical community. So now, before we get into the debate, what we need to do is we need to develop the criteria. Okay, so think of this as you are the executive who is trying to evaluate these options. And you are talking to several different vendors. Obviously, they are going to have their own stories. But unless you have the criteria, it's very hard to evaluate different options. So the only thing I'm looking for right now is going to be the criteria, the factor that anybody should be looking at in evaluating these two options. I am going to start with you, Tom, if you don't mind.
I don't mind at all, Sam. So we're looking for some criteria to make these judgments, these decisions.
Yes, sir.
There are a couple that I think are pretty key. One is, what is the nature of the software you're talking about? Are you talking about a SaaS solution that you're trying to choose, CRM or an ERP, and you're trying to make a cloud versus on-prem decision? So what is the nature of that? Or is it more of a custom developed solution and you're thinking, hey, I could run this on-prem or I could run it on Azure or AWS or Google, so public cloud and potentially even private cloud. But that's, to me, one of the first questions. What's the nature of the beast we're talking about from a software point of view? Second thing I'd say is, once you've identified the type of software, how modern is that software? At Varian, we have software that's 20 plus years old, developed over many years, very heavy, not cloud native. That's a big issue when we try and run it in the cloud, because then it has to be persistent. We can't just turn on and turn off VMs all the time and really run it efficiently. So it becomes very costly to run these old applications in the cloud. They really need to be modernized, or ideally you start cloud native. So again, I'd say that's a second factor, especially if you're talking the custom solutions, your own products. And it kind of goes to the third topic, which is cost. How big a factor is cost? Typically, the public cloud is more expensive than the private cloud. And frequently, you can run maybe your on-prem solution on ERP more cheaply than in the cloud. Again, this is the case for Varian, with the example being SAP. We run SAP on-prem chiefly because it's cheaper. We have our own data centers, a couple around the world, and we can do it very inexpensively compared to what it would cost us in the cloud. And we keep doing an annual review saying someday it's going to be cheaper, but we haven't reached that day yet. So I'd say that's a third big issue. And a fourth thing, and my final thing I'd say, is support. Particularly if you're looking at the SaaS cloud question versus on-prem for your ERP or your CRM or what have you, not all clouds are created equal, even on the SaaS side. Somebody like Salesforce, very sophisticated, very advanced. Others not so advanced, perhaps. So the support, the patching, the maintenance, the upgrade process, the quality of support generally, there really are differences. So you have to be wary and investigate that. So I'd say those are my four big items to be looking at when trying to make the decisions.
So great points, Tom. I am probably going to have some clarifying questions there, but as you mentioned, no two clouds are same. That's a great insight right there. Just some clarifications overall before we move to the next question or to the next person. We are looking at this from the executive perspective, the people who are trying to buy this product as opposed to building their own product. So when we look at manufacturing, retail, distribution, e-commerce, these companies don't necessarily have their own software products. So in most cases, they are probably going to be buying this software for themselves to be able to use, as opposed to selling that. Okay. So I need to clarify why nature of software matters to me as an executive if I'm actually trying to make that decision. How modern, I am not too sure why that should matter for me. Cost and support, I agree. Can you clarify why I should care for those two?
Well, again, the question of how modern or how cloud native a solution has more to do with the homegrown software, custom products that you might be selling, as opposed to buying, to your point. So in that sense, I would say maybe that piece, if it's a buy question, isn't as relevant. Maybe under some circumstances, but generally. That's maybe you can take that off the table if you like.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. And how about how modern? Is that still relevant, not relevant? So there were four. So we had nature of software, how modern, cost and support. Cost and support, I think everybody's going to agree. How modern? Is that still relevant, not relevant?
Well, again, I was addressing the modern question in my answer a moment ago, saying maybe that's not relevant if you're on the buy side and you're really like just looking at an on-prem versus a cloud option as a buyer of software. Hopefully, the solutions you're looking at are pretty modern, well developed, and that's not something that you need to worry about. Can it run effectively in the cloud? If you're going to look at a cloud option, I hope it can run in the cloud.
Yeah.
But in terms of the nature of it, again, I was making the point that is it pure SaaS or is it on-prem? There are still vendors out there who sell versions like SAP. They say you can run it on-prem or you can run it in the cloud. So I think these are questions. There are vendors who only do it on-prem, still some, and many more who are only in the cloud. So I think that's a factor that you need to be looking at too.
Amazing. Love it. Thank you so much, Tom. Wayne, I am actually going to move to you next, if you don't mind. Do you agree with what Tom has said so far? Do you disagree? What factors, in your opinion, would be relevant for the criteria in making this decision?
I'm here to pick a fight with both of you. The first thing, Sam, is I thought we were talking to a CFO about a decision to make an investment. We're not talking to geeks about geek stuff.
Yep.
So Tom's things are all very relevant, but I don't know in what room I'm having that conversation. It wouldn't be in the room with the CFO and the CEO and the board. We'd start with what's wrong? What are we trying to accomplish with this investment? It's like any other investment. If I'm going to build a new factory, why am I building it? So if I'm going to do something to change my software platform, what's my motivation? In Tom's case, maybe they did an acquisition, and now they've got a new line of business that it's hard to integrate into the bespoke software. Maybe you've outgrown it. Maybe it's a decision where the board just said, we're going to be cloud because that's what the investors want to hear. These are all valid reasons, but we got to start with the business problem before we even get to this kind of speeds and feeds. That's one. Number two, age to me is not as important as, how do I say this, decrepitude, technical debt.
Yeah.
If I'm running, I can be running a wonderful copy of SAP that's 25 years old and has $500 million worth of customizations in it. I know people that are running mainframe software that is 50 years old and has over $1 billion of intellectual property. And you know what? They're not changing that because they're afraid to. And it works. So I've got to start with, if your technical debt is high, I'll give a little definition for business terms. Technical debt is the sum total of all the maintenance you should have done but didn't do. It's a cumulative thing. It's an off-balance sheet liability that most companies are bigger than what sunk Enron. So you got to be aware of that. If Tom's software is easy to maintain and secure because he's been keeping it up to date, who cares if it's 40 years old? Because it's continually refreshed, whether the vendor does that or whether Tom's team does that. You know, but if you've let the thing rot, your attack surface keeps getting bigger. Your brittleness keeps getting bigger. And whenever you want to make a strategic move, an acquisition, move into a new market, a new product, a digital transformation, guess what? The CIO, the guy in Tom's chair, comes back and says, that acquisition is going to take me 4 years to digest, when the board was hoping for 4 months. So age doesn't matter. Technical debt, I think, matters a lot. And then all the other things that Tom said, I certainly agree with.
Okay. Some amazing insights here, but I need to make sure that we are able to translate that for the executives. So when you say business problem, obviously business problem is extremely relevant overall. What is driving your decision whether you are going to go for cloud or on-prem?
But let me back up. It depends. Am I going, do I want to make a decision because my data centers are way old, I'm losing my lease, the people who supported it in COBOL are all retiring, so I'm forced to make a choice? Was I hacked and somebody's penetrated my infrastructure and I'm faced with a costly rebuild? Or the investors or the regulators, if I'm in a regulated industry, have failed me on an audit and I'm looking at hundreds of millions of dollars of rebuilding for no good reason except to upgrade the technical debt? Am I doing it because the management says we're going from being a medical device business, we're going to build some hospitals? So now Tom needs EHR software that has to integrate into his manufacturing software. Maybe you do that already, Tom. I don't know. But maybe you're going to go upstream and downstream from the product you sell. So I think we have to start with a list of business problems we're trying to solve. What are the pain points or what are the opportunities? And that's where we sit down and say, what is the right solution? Because it isn't cloud or on-prem. It's SaaS versus bespoke. It's a package like old SAP or old Oracle that I could run on-prem or co-load, which is another name for fake cloud. I can run a private cloud, which has a lot of the disadvantages of cloud and a lot of the disadvantages of on-prem rolled into one product. So there's all sorts of ways a business can make bad choices if they're not sitting down and saying, what are we trying to accomplish from this?
Okay, amazing insights there. Okay, so since you reminded me the term fake cloud, we are going to have a separate discussion on that. And that's going to be really interesting. Now, I am actually going to move to Chris. Chris, what is the criteria? I know you are going to be bullet points, run.
So at a high level, if you think about SaaS versus on-premise, those are almost licensing strategies where subscription licensing versus the traditional, I buy it and I pay SA. So again, in that model, you can actually have on-premise licensing deployed on-premise service and pay subscription pricing. So that's just terminology. But I think, criteria, let's stay objective, is, org size has a factor. It absolutely has a factor.
Yeah.
I mean, because big orgs have big IT staffs and they want something to do, and there's contention between them and moving to the cloud because they think they won't have a job. So org size, IT departments is a criteria. Total cost of ownership totally is a criteria. Regulatory compliance. And I think that's an important one because as you look at, when I take my dynamic solutions that are in the cloud and I have SOC compliance up there, and a lot of compliance because you can't get to the back-end SQL database. As soon as I move it down on-prem, I lose SOC compliance. Okay, well, so there's regulatory compliance that may come from having that application outside of IT. And I think the other related part of that is risk tolerance, or what we used to call fault tolerance, because the cost, and it lends to total cost of ownership, meaning what would it cost an organization to build? And again, when we talk about on-premise, we're really talking about servers that are in your building, because fake cloud, Wayne, again, cloud means public cloud, Microsoft, AWS, Google. It could mean a colo. It could, again, so anytime you move the application out of your building, you're moving to the cloud, because what you do is you eliminate that dependency on the building and the local resources in the building, power, etc. But it goes back to fault tolerance, meaning how resilient is that server installation in your building? Again, because the colo is going to be way better. They're going to have redundant internet, redundant power. So you're getting redundancy as soon as you move out of your building. But when you're in your building, that's it. How much cost? And so it's total cost of ownership. The size of the organization and geographical dispersion, meaning if all your users are outside of your physical building's location, why would you put the servers there? That's the mindset, because if your power goes out, why does everybody in the US cannot work? So there's some mindset about, again, it's about that fault tolerance, meaning if my building power goes down, my workers still need to come to work. We had customers that would have an e-commerce site on a local server in a building. You don't put an e-com site locally. Why? Because when your lights are off, you want people to still be able to shop. So there's a number of factors there, but that fault tolerance, meaning the lights got to stay on. That's why you get it out of the building. And I think that's a key definition here. So we're talking about servers that are in your building as on-prem, because again, as soon as I move my on-prem licenses up into a cloud, I'm benefiting from all those redundancies that I don't have in my building. So just to clarify for decision-making purposes, and again, one other thing, IT fiefdoms, right? You get a lot of autonomy by moving your stuff out of your building, because now your IT guy can't hold you hostage. So anyway, a number of points there, but total cost of ownership, again, fault tolerance is a big deal, geographical dispersion of your workforce. And again, what's it cost, that TCO, and what's it cost to augment your building where you have all that protection against ransomware, electrical power failures, you need redundant electric, redundant internet, you get it. That's all about total cost. And a lot of times moving the application out of the building is really what I consider moving it from an on-premise to some type of an external cloud, whether it's fake cloud, public cloud. Like I said, you get where I'm going. You just get a lot more benefits that most organizations can't afford to pay for, unless they're billion-dollar companies, and maybe they have their own data centers per se. But those data centers typically aren't in their building either. They're in somebody else's colo facility, because even the billion-dollar companies aren't building a colo. They're moving in with somebody. So
Yeah, absolutely agree with everything that you said, and love. By the way, love your pointed responses. I mean, they are amazing. So I agree with you that there has to be a definition in terms of what exactly is on-prem or cloud, and I think that we are going to cover in case of fake cloud. We will define the definition of what exactly is cloud. Is it really a business decision, or is it really the technical decision? Spot on the licensing part, org size, TCO. One of the things that you mentioned, I think there is a nuance there. Skills is also equally relevant. So how skilled you are as the organization. So I think it could be part of the org size, or how your org is set up, but definitely skills is part of that. Uh, Regulatory compliance, I think that's a big driver overall. That's the biggest one. And then the risk tolerance and geo dispersion. So thank you so much, Chris, for that. I think those all are relevant factors. Denny, I am actually going to move to you now. I mean, you are the real cloud professional. So you are going to have far deeper insight than other folks who are simply utilizing the cloud. So tell us, what are the factors in evaluating this?
Yeah, so first I'd agree with everything that everyone said so far. I mean, there's the business decisions that are part of this, there's the technical decisions, there's the skill sets, but the way that I might frame this too is if you're looking at an SAP ERP system running on-prem or in the cloud, that's one thing. It has a very specific use case. But if you're looking at your entire IT landscape and you're looking at dozens, hundreds, thousands of VMs, and you're moving into containers and you're looking at alternative ways to be agile, then the cloud and on-prem really, they're not, I should say the cloud is not a place in that respect. The cloud is an operating model so that you can actually build within your own internal organization a cloud model that gives you mobility for applications to move into the other clouds. So that's something I didn't really hear in the conversation, but the cloud, it can be considered a place if it's being used just as an IaaS layer. But if you're really building a real agile environment, the cloud is an operating model, so you can automate all the different pieces within your own organization and have mobility. Now that does, of course, come back to all the other criteria, which are the skill sets, how cloud native are the applications, what is the support, what's the licensing model that you're going to use. All of those are relevant, but the key to the point I'm trying to make is the cloud isn't a place, the cloud is an operating model.
Okay, yeah, so amazing insight there. And just to give you some more clarity in terms of the audience that we have here, they are going to be slightly more financial executives. They might not be familiar as much with the IT terminology. For example, they might not even know what agile means in the finance or executive work. They might also not know what operating model is. I mean, a lot of listeners that we have are really the SMB manufacturers. So do you want to clarify something for them, what it means to them? And I'm coming to you, Chris.
Is that to me?
Yes, please.
Okay. So operating model is just your day-to-day operations of your IT staff. You have people that are administering, provisioning applications, provisioning hardware, making the operations of IT working. You want to automate all the different pieces of that just to make your operation run smoothly. That's already been done for you, presumably in the cloud, but you have to have the skill sets to be able to move it there. So you end up with a question of, if we want to take our operation and move it to AWS or Azure, you now have to be potentially using the native tools of AWS and Azure, and that's a different skill set than the people I have. So those are two different ways to operate. So the thought process would be, let's have a single operating model so I can use the tools and the skills and the people that I have, and I can then take that and push it to the cloud. So to me, I don't care if the workload is on-prem, I don't care if it's in cloud A, B, or C, it just works in one single way.
Okay, amazing. Thank you so much, Danny, for that. Chris, first you, and then I'm coming to you, Wayne.
Yeah, Danny, based on what you said, I think I forgot the can shrink, can grow. And I think as organizations, if they had that need to rapidly scale, man, you could dial it up and turn on resources like on a dime, whereas on-prem, I ordered servers, they should be here in 2 months. So anyway, that was just bootstrapping on what you said, the operating model. So Good
Yeah,
criteria.
I
Not everybody
agree.
needs that, but that rapid scale is certainly is empowered completely there. That's it.
I think we need to simplify that explanation a bit so that the listeners can understand. And I think Wayne is actually going to do that. Wayne, on to you.
Yeah, the example is if your business is seasonal and you're in the cloud, a hyperscale cloud, you can say, I always need X. I'm going to pay 5,000 a month for the base load, and then I have a holiday season, so I'm going to need 2X or 3X. So for 2 months a year, I want 2X or 3X. The bill goes up, the services go up. Oh, we just did an acquisition. I need to double it tomorrow. It goes up. Okay. It goes down. Okay. And so you license. There's licensing is very complicated. I don't want to oversimplify. There's base load. There's bursts. There's all sorts of ways to license for growth and unpredictability. The cost of risk. I'm going to give you a quick example of cloud versus on-prem / colo. Because Chris, I disagree with you. Whether it's in my shop or it's in somebody else's building, if I got to buy discrete servers and rack them and stack them and install them, it isn't hyperscale cloud to me. 10 years ago, I worked for a mortgage company. We wanted to put it in AI tool. We knew just what tool we wanted. We had the software picked out. I needed to configure servers. I had to buy 14 servers. I had to buy storage. I had to buy licenses for the operating systems. I had to get them ordered. I had to get them delivered. Oh, we didn't have enough racks in the colo. So they had to move me to another cage, by the way, because we ran out of cage. 4 months later, we turned on the first transaction. Cost me $540,000 in CapEx and labor. A year ago, I had a client that said, let's try the same thing. I want to do AI pricing for a product. I went to Azure. I went click, 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 click. It was $6 a month to try it, but the first month was free. We were trying building test cases a week later. That's the difference in cloud for most people. I can deploy stuff I hadn't imagined because the vendor has already built that into the environment for me. That's what I think of as the main difference. If I take my stuff and put it out of my building, and Tom builds a data center, and it runs with mainframes in it, or it runs with old servers in it, it's still a very discrete, very inflexible operation. Whereas the cloud companies, they turn a knob and it goes up and down.
Yeah, could not agree more. Thank you so much, Wayne, for those examples and stories. I think they definitely help overall in understanding what the differences are. So, Andy, I want to make sure that you are able to speak, and our goal always is so that everybody is able to speak within 30 minutes. And I apologize that I could not, come to you, but please go ahead and tell us what are the criteria that you believe are relevant to evaluate two different decisions. And do you agree with everybody, or what has been said so far?
Well, a ton of suggestions have already been made, and there aren't that many more. But the one that sticks out is it depends on the application. One person mentioned what is the business problem that you're trying to solve. And if you know what the best product is to solve that business problem, and it's on-prem, then you go on-prem. If it's, certainly, these gentlemen are obviously all working with much larger companies than what I work with. I mentioned at the beginning, I work with small to mid-sized companies, under 500 million size. So, and ERP centric. So if a product fits their needs, that, and especially if they're only a single site versus multi-site, or if they got, or across countries. Obviously, there's value in being in the cloud, but most companies that I deal with are single site or relatively local, and depending upon the application, COBOL is a little old for what I work with, Wayne, but actually, COBOL was invented the same year I was born, so there you go. 1954. But, so I work with two different products. One is completely on-prem, and the other one is mostly in the cloud, and certainly designed for the cloud, whereas the on-prem one doesn't require a lot of IT support or upgrades or patches or enhancements. So some of the values of being in the cloud are not as prevalent. So therefore, back to what I originally said, it depends on which is the best application for that specific client.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think the type of application is definitely going to be relevant in deciding that decision. Sometimes some applications may be relevant for on-prem versus cloud. So thank you so much, Andy, for those thoughts. So now let's move to the discussion on fake cloud, because we want to make sure that we are covering that, because that's what really defines what a real cloud is, the real advantages of the cloud, which a lot of people don't understand. They simply feel that, they read about cloud. They are simply thinking that cloud is all about, you can use that across the devices, as long as that is in the browser, probably that is cloud. But identifying and spotting fake cloud requires deeper expertise. And we all know this. We all, at least in the panel, we all can see a product and can tell you that this is a fake cloud. Number one, what I want you guys to do now is, what is a fake cloud and what implications it is going to have for the organization if they chose a fake cloud as opposed to a real cloud. How to spot a fake cloud during a demo, especially in the ERP demo or typically CRM demo or whichever demo is happening, how to identify a fake cloud. So these are some of the points that I want you guys to cover. So Chris, I'm actually going to start with you now. Do you want to start?
Sure. And I think as you look at features that come with where your application resides, I mean, certainly what we see in the Microsoft Dynamics Cloud is the maintenance that's included. And I think as you look at total cost of ownership, where you're in one of these data centers, I mean, it's still really just your on-premise install moved where you get some more redundancy. And in the end, you still own the application, still have to maintain the application, you still have to service the operating system, you still have to manage all of that. So again, what I see in the complete SaaS cloud when you're up there is you're seeing management of the operating systems, the platforms, as well as the application. That's best case scenario. And again, depending on if you take your app and you move it, but I think it's that. It's what are the features and how hands-off is it? And that really stipulates the total cost of ownership. And again, like I said, there's incremental progress getting it out of the building, as I said, versus we get some redundancy, but it's still not the complete cloud. And I think as Wayne alluded, there's a lot of right away plug-in services. Those aren't all in a private cloud. Okay. So again, it's all about features and functions. And as you move up into these public clouds, AWS, Google, or Microsoft, they have so many other things. The AI, it just connects. So I think that's it. You're differentiating features. And hey, it really depends on budget and where you're at and your application you're running to get there. So
yeah, so features and functions can definitely play a role. But if I look at my 1970s ERP system, a lot of the features that I'm looking at in my real cloud, they may not have those features, but they are going to be using the cloud native development technology. They are not going to be as robust overall in the feature set, but they are going to have the kind of user experience that you get from the cloud native technologies. Okay, that's what I am looking for when we talk about comparing your real cloud versus fake cloud. Fake cloud, when you look at it, you can tell by looking at it that it's fake. It's almost like a fake car. If you look at fake car, you can tell by looking at fake car. So okay, Tom, you have a lot of experience with this. So tell me, how do I spot whether I'm buying a fake Ray-Ban or a real Ray-Ban?
Well, I'm not sure about that specific question, but I do agree with several of the speakers on the panel today about the notion that just putting hardware into a data center that's not on-prem is not the cloud. And if you're being sold a package, a cloud solution where it's some single data center, and I've been through this with one of our CRM solutions that we chose once upon a time, and we're in the process of abandoning. We haven't gotten off it yet, but years ago we thought this is a great cloud solution, and it actually was a good application, remains a good application, but it was running out of one data center, and it created issues of latency for people in our organization in Asia and in Europe, because it was basically somewhere in the Midwest of the US. So Americans were pretty happy. It had someone was mentioning, I think maybe Chris, issues of fault tolerance. We had downtime issues because that one data center, there was no real failover, and there were not alternatives for us. There was a very on-prem-like upgrade experience where there was downtime. You're expecting in the cloud typically that you're at near zero, if not truly zero downtime, and that people need to take servers offline. They can move the VMs or the workloads to other places that are up, and you don't experience any downtime, for example. So if people are telling you, hey, you might have latency issues because it's only one location. Hey, you are going to have to deal with more downtime, or as much downtime as you would on-prem, pretty much. These are red flags in my mind. This isn't a real cloud.
Okay, some amazing insights there. And, if an organization, let's say, if they have the IT people, they probably would know how to identify a cloud native development. So I am not necessarily worried about the people who already have a little bit of IT background. Typically, this problem happens when we are looking at these small to medium-sized businesses, and they don't understand what is a real cloud versus fake cloud and what are going to be real implications for them. Typically, your vendors are going to tell all the kind of stories because they are trying to sell, which is great. But, our goal from this conversation is to be able to tell them, okay, this is how you are going to be able to spot. And again, if we go by the data center, if we go by how this is powered by the IT infrastructure, that's only going to be in the PowerPoint deck. From their perspective, the only thing they are really looking at it is at the application. So by looking at the application, let's say if they are looking at the demo on a computer, how can I tell whether I'm buying a fake car versus a real car? Now, before I move to the next person, I have one shout out for the guest. Hey, Damon, thank you so much for joining us today. We are so excited to have you here. So Wayne, I want to move to you next. And could you touch this from the perspective of real versus fake and how to identify that?
Sure. Well, to your point, if you're not an IT expert, you can't ask the technical questions. So here's the questions I would ask. So if I gave you a credit card, could I spin up an instance? Could I have people on it tomorrow? If they say, oh, no, we've got an installation process, it's an old model piece of software. I'll also say to them, can I run it on my server? I got a server in my computer room. Can it run on my servers? If their answer is, oh, yeah, no problem, it's fake cloud. If they tell you, well, we have this way of putting the cloud in your shop, and because there are some cloud tools from Google and Microsoft. So if they make it look like a process, they're probably real cloud. If they're trying to talk you out of doing that, they're definitely real cloud. It's really questions about, well, what if I wanted to add 12 data fields? Show me how to do that right now on the fly and let's see them. Likely they are modern architecture. Because I'll say this, if anybody could build a modern architecture product that ran on a properly fault-tolerant server, and I wasn't IT savvy, maybe I don't care. It's about what does it do for me from solving my problem, and what's the cost going to be over time. But a couple of other hints are, as Tom said, is the upgrade, the maintenance done when I ask them to. I want to schedule a maintenance, but only upgrade every other year. No problem, fake cloud. If they tell you we do 8 a year, 6 a year, 12 a year, and you don't have a choice, you can delay 2, then it's real cloud. And so these are kind of things that you would look at, but none of them are absolutes, because I can trick. If my goal is to trick you as a novice user, hate to say this, a couple of us are consultants. We can tell you in 10 minutes. Google it. Anybody, by the way, that says we are born in the cloud, that's generally their call sign for don't try to run this on your server. So, but I'll come back to, again, it's about, does it solve your problem, and what are the pros and cons? Pros and cons being uptime. Maybe you shut down on weekends and don't care. Maybe it's not critical to your delivering your customer experience, and so if it's down for an hour a year, 2 hours a year, you don't care. And it's half the price of something else that looks really cool, but you're not going to use the features. Somebody said to me once, here's your car example, what's the best car? And somebody said, a Ferrari. And he said, well, I'm going to haul manure in it. It changes the answer. So the question can never be fake cloud, real cloud. The question can be fit for purpose.
Yeah,
You guys want to be geeky, and I want to talk about business. I'm sorry.
some great points there. Just one quick clarification that born in the cloud is a great way of identifying, real cloud versus fake cloud. But sometimes there could be vendors who might have actual real cloud. They may not have born in the cloud, but they may have advanced to that. Okay, because of their cloud native technology, they may have gone there. So it does not mean that you are not born in the cloud, that you will never be cloud native. You could be cloud native as the legacy vendor as well.
A vendor is a brand name on a building.
Yeah,
I can buy from a vendor, and there are some. We're not talking vendors. I can talk to a big vendor, and they have a cloud product because they bought one, and they have a non-cloud product because they bought that one too. Cool, great. But if you tell me that an old product built to run on a server in my building and be upgraded once a year, once every 2 years, is magically going to be transformed into a cloud product with the features of flexibility, the features of containerization, the features of modularity, the features of APIs or the ability to integrate things, the report under it, the published database spec. I mean, I could do this for a long time, but it doesn't happen overnight. I know one big software company, their strategy was called Fusion. Here's a test. Who remembers Fusion? The company's been working on it for about 12 years. It may be there, but they actually have another whole product called Product A in the cloud. Because you know what? It isn't really there. No, their product is a lot better than an old, flexible, monolithic, all built in one code base product, but it sure is a far cry from doing it with a different technology stack.
Okay, amazing. Thank you so much, Wayne, for that. And audience is actually loving your insights. So again, kudos to you. Now I am actually going to move to Denny. Denny, do you want to describe what a fake cloud is and how our executives can spot that during a demo?
Yeah, most of it's been said, but the only thing I'll say, I think what sparked the term was a colo being a fake cloud. If you're just taking your servers and moving them to a third party and having them run your mess for less, that's not a cloud. That's really just an extension of a data center. So that's what I would point out as really the idea of that's not cloud. Cloud actually has specifically, elasticity, and it has all sorts of attributes that go with it.
Yeah, love mess for less. So spot on. Thank you so much. Andy, what are your thoughts? What a real cloud is, what a fake cloud is? How can you spot what are going to be implications? Let's say if companies utilize a fake cloud versus real cloud.
Well, first off, I'll preface my opinion in that I'm not an IT expert like the rest of these folks are. I'm more of an application operational expert. But what I look for in a demo or something like that is how easy are they navigating from one function to another? Are they having to or look along the bottom of the screen to see if they've already opened up all the applications so it's easy to snap it in, as opposed to actually going to another function? And are they doing it the old-fashioned way, or are they doing it by typing in or selecting on a URL? Web-enabled. If it's web-enabled, you're probably real.
Okay, amazing. I have seen a lot of fake clouds that are web-enabled, but they
Is
are
that right?
not real cloud. Oh yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm learning a lot by listening to everyone.
100%.
Let me tell you.
It's very easy to put a web front end. I have a client that's got a web front end on an old AS400 system.
Really?
And
Wow.
it was 38 years old, but they put a web front end on it, so it's all point and click, but everything
Right.
underneath it is literally 38 years old.
So I'm sorry, Wayne. I'm a neophyte when it comes to IT. So how am I going to recognize if it's real or fake?
And the question I asked the vendor, add 10 fields to the system in production while you're watching.
I love that. I wrote that one down. Yeah, that's
simple
good.
as that. Or take any report in the system and give it to me so I can modify it right now and run it in production.
Right.
So I'm going to give you some more clues here because I'm not getting from the panel. Okay. So one of the things that you could do is if the application is developed as mobile native, most likely that is probably going to be cloud native as well, because the applications that were designed in 80s and 90s, mobile does not exist at that time. So if they can show you the app as it is, the way it appears on your browser, most likely it is probably going to be cloud native. If they have a completely different app, which looks very different from the way, and again, you need to pay attention to the details, the way your features and functions appear on your UI. If they appear different, most likely they are running a lot of legacy functionality in the backend. Again, the legacy vendors have come a long way in improvising their code. The other catch that you might want to have is how fluid the application is overall when you move from one screen to the next. I think a lot of people mentioned that. Go ahead, Wayne.
Just like we can put a web front end on an old AS400 system using the same kind of lift and shift technology, I can build a mobile app using the same server that actually runs the web. So I wouldn't, for me, think about an application. Data lives in the middle. If the data is not flexible, you're going to be stuck down the road. You're going to paint yourself into a corner. If the application's built well, on top of the data layer is the process layer, the stuff that Andy knows. How do we cash a check? How do we pay an invoice? How do we do the process things? And then on top of that is the user interface layer. Maybe I have a mobile interface. Maybe I have a web. Maybe I have a spoken voice or a chatbot. That's actually the easiest layer to modernize because it does the least amount of heavy lifting. I would ask questions about the data first, and then about how easy it is if Andy's got a system that is manufacturing and he wants to put a hotel, and the company's got, I'm going to buy a hotel. Oh, I can snap a hotel management in to your accounting system and nobody will know it's a third-party product. Maybe that's a real cloud vendor.
Okay, amazing. Thank you. Okay, Chris, go ahead, please.
So I think I've heard the conversation evolve to, the move to the cloud versus on-prem. And again, I differentiated on-prem in your building versus not in your building. And we agree that through fake cloud to public cloud, there's gains in redundancy and feature functionality. But I think the other conversation has gone to, is it a cloud-based ERP system built for the cloud ERP versus it's an on-premise app that's shoved up into a servers that are outside of this business. And I think there's two conversations. So on-prem in the building versus not in the building, there's a lot of value there. But as you're selecting an ERP system, now we're back to how can you tell if it's really built for the cloud? Because I've got competitors, I won't mention them, but they've built a completely web-based cloud product, but the one they've got it built and it's hosted on their infrastructure in a data center, and it's running Oracle behind this cloud-based web experience. It's a standalone. It's not the public cloud. It's still a private cloud. So as you poke into the software vendors, and that's where I feel like the conversation changes, how do you know that this is a real cloud-based app? Well, again, different versions. Again, is it built for the Microsoft cloud? Is it built for the Amazon cloud? So again, where it has all the AI plugged in, I think to that point, if it's a cloud-based ERP system you're looking at, you're right. You're going to have different grades of feature functionality that are going to come into play depending on whose cloud is it hosted in, right? Because again, a lot of these providers, they have their own data centers. They're hosting it just as they're the cloud, right? Anybody can say they're the cloud. Different grades of features. How can you tell? And again, the on-prem, I can deploy my Microsoft stuff on the servers in your building, and it's browser-based, and the apps all work. And you're like, well, where is it? I can deploy it in a data center. It looks the same. It's in Microsoft Public Cloud. It looks the same. But if you really get in, you lose features from here to here to here. You get the most up here, you lose some here. So people really need to be critical of, what am I losing? What features did I lose because it's in a data center versus in the native Microsoft public cloud that it was built in, for example. So like I said, a couple conversations here that I'm hearing. So.
Okay, amazing. We need to move to the next question. I cannot take any more comments on this question. I'm sorry. So the next question is going to be, because we need to cover that, and that is going to be really critical for the decision making. So one of the things that a lot of people feel that in 2021, it's all about cloud. I should go for cloud blindly. Now, financially, if I think more from the CFO perspective, is cloud still a valid option? Or should I still be looking at on-prem? So Tom, I am actually going to start with you. Should I be even worrying about on-prem if cloud is the way to go?
Well, again, I think Wayne at the beginning of his first comments pointed out that there's a lot of it depends here. What is your particular set of circumstances? What is the problem you're trying to solve, right? And And I would say that if you are a relatively small operation, and it would be challenging to become compliant from a SOX point of view and to maintain that level of compliance yourself, to achieve validation and maintain validation with every change and update that might be made to software solutions that you use or that you've developed yourself. That to me is an indication that you probably ought to be looking to be as truly cloud as possible. Again, when I started at the beginning and you asked about criteria, I jumped immediately to criteria. And again, Wayne's comments rang true for me a bit. If it's the CFO, I was thinking the question the CFO has in his mind is, how the heck do I stay out of jail? Okay. So tell me how this is not going to create a major problem if I'm in life science with the FDA. Tell me how this is going to be SOX compliant. Tell me how my risk is going to be greater or less based on this choice. And if you are not a pretty sizable organization and pretty sophisticated and able to achieve some of that level of risk mitigation that the CFO would be looking for on-prem, you probably ought to be taking the cloud very seriously, because at least, again, and I'll use some terminology that maybe everyone here is familiar with on the panel, but maybe not all of our listeners. If you look at validation from a FDA regulatory point of view, and you talk about IQ, installation qualification, the hardware is installed as intended, as designed. Then you get to the OQ, operational performance or operational qualification, and you get to a PQ, right? Which is performance qualification. That's what the FDA expects. You've done an IQ test, an OQ test, and a PQ test. And basically, if you are going to the cloud, the IQ and the OQ are really something that your cloud vendor is responsible for. You've got to make sure that the application runs the way at the highest level in the stack. You got to make sure that the application runs and gives you the results that are expected. You have to do some testing and validation, but it's much less than the full stack. And so you get a lot of value in that sense, a lot of security, and maybe sleep better at night if you know that you've got an AWS or a Microsoft that owns that part of the stack, or a Salesforce for that matter, that owns those first two areas. So that's an example to me of scale of operation, sophistication of operation, size of company. Those really do matter in making this choice, and how much risk you want to take on yourself, or can you distribute that risk with some of your partners.
Okay, amazing insights there. And we are going to move a little quicker just because we are running out of time, and I want to make sure that everybody is able to speak on this topic. So is on-prem still relevant? Chris? You are on mute.
Absolutely, it's still relevant based on business requirements. Absolutely. So.
Okay, can you provide some examples where it might be relevant?
Again, in the security realms we're getting into with defense contractors, they need to deploy their applications in an on-premise manner to get to CMMC level 3 certification. So there's a perfect example why you still have an on-prem requirement, because public cloud doesn't check the box. I'll stop there.
Okay, amazing. Love it. Guys, if you can provide more examples, that will actually help our listeners in terms of why on-premise still matters. Wayne?
Well, the comment I'll append to Chris's comment is yet, because all of the cloud vendors are working on higher levels of CMMC certification and trying to be compliant for everything. Look, the NSA runs on these clouds. The US's NSA. They're fairly secure if you do them right. The answer is, depending on the question, is it okay to leave something on-prem that's working on-prem today? Absolutely. I mean, Tom says he's doing it. It made the most financial sense. Large banks, large insurance companies are running hundreds of millions of dollars worth of mainframes on-prem, and they are not moving them quickly because they solve their problem, and they're the most cost-effective way, most secure way, most scalable way to do it. The question is more interesting if you're buying a new business, starting a new business, and you want to start up something. Now, I would say cloud first is the strategy I would approach. let's look and see if there's a cloud option that meets our security requirements, financial requirements, and so on, and interfaces with the rest of our company. So I think it would be criminal not to be cloud first in your evaluation of a new system. But I think that's a different question.
Okay, thank you so much, Wayne. And I agree with everything that you said. Some great insights there. Danny, quickly, is on-premise still relevant?
Yes, absolutely still relevant. I'll give two examples of customers in different parts of the spectrum. One, I've had customers before cloud was even a viable option saying, we want to get out of the data center business. I can't wait to get to the cloud. I just don't have the capability and the strength. It's not our core business. The cloud vendors, that is their core business. So once it became relevant, they immediately moved. Then I've also got large, and Wayne just mentioned this, large banks. They have scale. They have great IT staffs that are very robust. They don't have the need and the drive to go to the cloud, particularly while they are looking at it and doing things in the cloud. They've got the ability to just stay the way they've always done it, of course, with the newer technologies.
Okay, love it. Andy, quickly, is on-premise still relevant?
Excuse me, absolutely. The comment I made already was it depends on the application and what's going to solve the business challenge or the business problem. But I mean, there's lots of companies that are not in a web-centric area. I'm talking to one company that's in the middle of Saskatchewan. They don't have any access. There's no sense talking about that there. I mean, they're going to have to come up with VPNs or whatever else to be remote. It's just, so again, it depends on the circumstance.
Yeah, I agree with you. I have seen some scenarios as well where internet connection could be very spotty, especially in the warehouse and manufacturing situations.
Completely.
So cloud would not work there. So thank you so much for that. Now we are actually going to close because we have just 1 minute, and we are going to take just one quick closing advice from everybody. If you can keep it within 4 or 5 words or a sentence, I will definitely appreciate that. The advice that we are looking for is whether cloud versus on-prem. Closing advice, Chris, from you, please.
New system purchase, cloud first.
Love it. Wayne, closing advice from you.
Understand your business problem.
Love it. Tom, closing advice from you.
Agree with Chris and Wayne. Cloud first is the way to go.
Okay, love it. Jenny, your closing advice.
Cloud is not a place, it's an operating model.
Love it. Andy, your closing advice.
I agree with all of them. The point is that's what's the application, what's the business problem?
Love it. Thank you so much, Andy, for those thoughts. And quick shout out for our guest, Vanessa. Thank you so much for joining. And if you are joining for the first time, we meet every Thursday at 4:30 p.m. Eastern, and we talk about digital transformation. We pick one topic each week, and we bring an expert of panels who are really expert at their craft. So join us next week on Thursday. Thank you so much for joining. You all have a great week.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, Sam. Thank you.